I now call upon the final team to take the podium from the Freie University of Berlin. They will be questioned by our first team this evening from Princeton University. So I call upon Berlin to take their place and defend their motion. 100 years later, we Europeans are ready to take up arms together. First speaker is Mr. Calix Perker.
That should do nicely. So, on a more somber note, 100 years ago, European empires were at one another's throats and embarked on a road of unprecedented bloodshed. Tens of millions of people were slain by mustard gas, bullets and bombs. Tens of millions of families were waiting in vain for their fallen soldiers to come home. And they didn't come, of course, it's in vain. And the rivers ran red of blood. And these unbelievable horrors were never to be repeated again. That's what we vowed to ourselves. Yet, merely 21 years later, we kind of did. 21 years later, tens of millions of people were once again slain with Europe at its very heart. Once again, we killed people in the millions. Once again, we let this huge human atrocities take place. And of course that begs the questions. What had we learned? Had we learned nothing to simply let it happen again? Were we that stupid? Were we that blind? And no, that is not fair. The first thing we thought we learned was, let's bankrupt Germany, that's probably going to help things. It didn't. But to be honest, we did find the gist of the problem. We did try to advance. We did try to get ahead of ourselves. We did try to foster cooperation amongst nations, to create something bigger than nations. And that was the League of Nations, the first real supranational institution that was charged with creating peace in Europe. But it failed. And of course it failed because we weren't daring enough. We didn't give this organization the power it would have needed to do so. We didn't have the courage to actually cross borders and shake hands and make this a meaningful endeavor. It took a Second World War to actually teach us. For it was then that we actually saw where we should have to do things, where we should actually come together and how we could. It was Churchill who actually formulated this in words very well, as early as 1946. He said, "There is a remedy which in a few years would make Europe a happier and free place. And to do this, we must establish a sort of United States of Europe." And that is where I think we looked over the pond to our American brethren. And that is where we've got the idea. And we developed it further. And we created the EU. And we actually grew together. We got rid of borders. We were able to actually cooperate. We created a domestic market. We got rid of the different currencies. We've got a common currency. Now there's one fundamental thing lacking, though, to make us an actual nation. I've seen you. You may in a moment. And there's one fundamental thing that we are still lacking in order to actually become something resembling a nation. And that is an army. Yes, it sounds counterintuitive. By the absolute silence here, it's not nice to speak about guns. But that is the next logical step that we have to go if we want actual peace. Now, please.
You would become like America. America's army came at the cost of terrible welfare spending. The opportunity cost of buying a military is healthcare and crucial things for civilians. How can you justify this?
My dear sir, I do appreciate your concerns, but the thing is, we Europeans, we already do have several armies. We want to make it one. And we've sown the seed for that before. We've actually got something as a common security policy. We've just been too actually politically unwilling to nurture the seed that we've sown in the 90s especially by creating a common army. And
but,
in
Mr. Speaker.
that has been, no thank you, that has been brought up in the 50s by actually
Mr.
a person
Speaker.
in this parliament Mr. Plevon, he actually also already wanted to make a European army out of existing European armies. And that was voted down. Now I say we'd have to vote that up. We have to nurture that seed that we've grown. We've already got battle groups that fight alongside one another. They don't always work as nicely as they would to, but that's only because we haven't actually invested in them. If we do that, we can once finally work together as brothers in arms. And then we don't have to look over for the NATO and the Americans to help us out of our misery. Then when we see fire on Europeans' doorstep, it can be European arms that can quench those flames. It can be us. When the Russian bear wants to hunt some fresh fish in the West, it can be European metal that will make him think again. And that is what we stand for. For we can only be truly united when we stand united as brothers in front of a common foe when he arises as Europe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I call upon the final official speaker of the debate, I shall remind the audience that once the 6 teams have completed their speeches, then you members of the audience, when the jury is actually deliberating, will have your opportunity to intervene and make speeches on any of the motions or ask questions to any of the speakers. And the speakers, of course, can come back on each other. So now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the final speaker from the Freie Universität of Berlin, Mr. Attila Decani.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear judges, distinguished members of parliament and my honorable fellows, we want to introduce to you here something which can seem controversial, which truly wakes up some bad ghosts of the past. And though we think that it's needed, that we need here this common European army, I want to explain you in my speech that we are no warmongers. In fact, we have learned why there are sometimes armies needed in the world to bring democracy, to save better. We were saved twice by the Americans. We think by now, when we have taken the steps and are already forming an actual country almost of 21 nations, we should take the responsibility and not behind the cover of saying we are just a civil power. No, what we think is with power also comes your duty to promote freedom and to save other countries if needed. I want to firstly answer Ashi's point, which Cambridge brought up in a POI. The reason why Europe is threatened by nationalism is not Europe itself. It's because Europe is not finished so far. It's because people feel there is just a bureaucracy they can never really understand, which never did anything, because there is no prestige in this damn institution they can look up. And we think that an army is a sign of an actual country borning, is a sign of I can identify myself as a citizen under a flag in a good sense. We think when Europe happens, people won't fight against each other, but people will acknowledge each other as brothers and sisters. And it will promote rather peace and safe, also within the country, within Europe, and not only in the world. Okay, before I continue.
You presume that forming an army will bring people closer together, but just as we've seen with currency, won't the reality of divergent military aims cause significant conflict within this coordination attempt?
I find it quite easy to bash about the euro for 3 years by now, when we had 40 years when we developed these all countries together, when we finally managed to create a currency. That's what most people do not think about. Creating a currency doesn't happen like this. It happens through a constant progress, when people sit down at the table, when 21 different backgrounds, nationalities and opinions clash, and at the very end we are able to succeed here. We are able to create currencies, we are able to create free borders, a common market, and just because something fails for one time slightly, we still think it's a good thing. Moreover, we think we should go on that path, and we should make the European Union more closer. What is another aspect of our motion here? It is not only that Europe can face threatening phenomena in the
But,
world.
Mr. Speaker.
Let me take your question and I continue.
Thank you much. Your proposition presumes that many countries that are not militarized at all will be developed. Isn't it the case, as we've seen in America and probably every other country that's militarized in the world, that having an extensive army actually makes us predisposed to battle more, and that where we have peace, we will have a lot more war?
I find it, to be honest, quite a shame that we are discussing here whether we should intervene somewhere or not when thousands of people are killed in incidents all over the world. It's really easy to talk about that here in this heated room when people outside are dying because of IS, because of other threats in the world, and Europeans are hiding behind the cover saying, well, it can go wrong. I want to say all lives. I want to say that these countries unify here, that whenever France intervenes in Mali to actually save people, Germany doesn't say, well, we send you 2 planes and that should be enough. We want here that all the nations take together the responsibility to further their own process and to promote this peace in the world. It can go wrong. We probably assume it won't because we are the Europeans. We have managed to create a currency, to create common markets. In fact, we will also back USA, that the USA don't have the policy anymore the world. We can act on the same level with the US and promote a much better system. Humanity is able to achieve great things. We are landing space shuttles on comets. We built a tunnel which connects the United Kingdom and France, 2 countries which really hate each other. In fact, even European people by now like German people. That's what we all achieved here, and we want to go further. We see there is a possibility for that. We don't see why we shouldn't do this. In this historical place, the Frenchman René Plavin introduced his plan in 1950 about a common European army. 60 years ago, exactly at the French National Assembly, it was rejected. I want to call upon these ghosts right now and say, we learned of our failure. We are at the maturity step to create a common army which can not only defend our interests, but can help the world to further peace, what we also got to give it to some other people. Thank you.